Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at in the world today. My name is Luke Wing, and welcome to part 3 of our path to net zero. We're going to be looking at some insights, technologies, and solutions, and we'll go ahead and just get underway today. All right. So again, part 3 of our webinar series, and we're going to be covering a little more Naviate Zero and One Click LCA today, and the synergy between the two softwares. Like I said, my name is Luke Wing. I'm a performance and innovation consultant here at Symetri, and I'm a part of our co-innovation lab who helps drive research and development and sustainable practices throughout our firm. And we also have joining us today is Samuel Boswell. If you were here for part 2, he did an excellent job explaining some of the LCA basics. He is an LCA consultant through One Click LCA, and he's part of our co-innovation lab as well here at Symetri. So let's go ahead and just quickly cover our decarbonization mission. I know you kind of just saw that brief video, so we'll just get into it really quickly. Obviously, here at Symetri, we are dedicated to driving sustainability within our AEC and O industry, and even the M for manufacturing. But we also focus on decarbonization through our technology and even providing expert consulting services. We're helping our customers really reduce their environmental footprint and hopefully meet your guys' sustainability goals. And our goal is really to make a positive impact by leveraging solutions and expertise to contribute really to more of a sustainable future and working better. But why do we do this? Well, we focus heavily on sustainability because, I think most of us can agree climate change is causing some widespread negative impacts. We have more frequent heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and storms. And these obviously affect our ecosystems and, affect community security and food security as well. So they're also leading to biodiversity loss and forcing some of us to relocate during the sea level rise. And it's really focusing us to really think about how we approach and attack the built environment. So all these challenges are directly impacting how we plan, design, and build. And it's clear that we need to start addressing these to start meeting these initiatives. So as designers and in the construction industry, we play a huge role in our carbon emissions and resources and consumptions. So sustainable construction is about minimizing this environmental impact that we have. So by using recycled materials, let's use energy efficient materials and reducing our waste of these materials, we can really just build smarter, right? And lower our emissions, create even better outcomes for our projects and the communities that they're built in. So it's really important to address this because right now, embodied carbon, the 11% of global emissions is tied to the building process. And that's not even accounting our operational energy at the moment. So we have some work to do. But our commitment runs through sustainability is really reflected through actions. We're not just talking the talk, we like to walk the walk. And so through collaboration with our partners like One Click LCA, because we see this as important and meaningful to drive the industry for change, one of our key initiatives was developing Naviate Zero, which is powered by One Click LCA, which is hopefully going to enable you guys, the users, to assess carbon impact earlier in the design process and take this proactive approach to data-driven design and really help you guys understand your materiality and the impacts of those through the design process. So our co-innovation lab is really the driving force behind this. It's really focused on transparency. We're focused on collaboration and innovation with values that are really effective to decarbonization. So our goal is to provide sustainable solutions that make a difference in the built environment. And I think that's why you guys are all here too, because that's what you guys want to learn how to do. So real quick, we'll just get the LCA portion out of the way real quick and get the overview of what LCA is. If you were here for the last 2 series, you may have a good understanding, but for some of you freshies or newbies in there, let's go ahead and cover it real quick. So what is LCA, or life cycle analysis, right? You hear this term all the time. It's the alphabet soup. Everyone loves acronyms. They throw it out there. But really, it is a systematic methodology that we use to evaluate our impact of a product, service, or even a process that we take over its entire life cycle. So the life cycle typically includes from, extracting or cutting down the tree, the acquisition of that raw material, sawing that wood down into lumber for the production, getting it to Home Depot and distributing it for you guys to pick up and use and build your bathroom remodel, correct? So at the end of life or disposal of that bathroom, what are you doing with those materials? Are you upcycling that wood? Are you throwing the wood in the trash? Is it going to the dump? Is it getting shred up and put in your garden? I don't know. So that's what we have to start considering from day one, right? So LCA really considers those various environmental indicators through that entire process. And what we're looking at really is greenhouse gas emissions is one of the main drivers. Energy consumption, how much water usage there was, and waste generation. So all of this is used to assess that product and the overall product sustainability performance, if you will, right? So it falls on this whole life cycle, right? And the life cycle assessment follows international standards, and they're the ISO 1400 series, I believe, and then we have the ISO 21930, I believe, and these rules are really for environmental product declarations, EPDs, right? That's the driver behind all this. So construction to really, the EPDs help support construction to support the full life cycle shown kind of on this slide. So those EPDs report on the product that's kind of like a nutrition label that you go to the store, you look on your cereal, see what food or ingredients are in there. That's what the EPD is doing for you guys, right? So for our Naviate Zero, we're really designing it for you guys as designers. And it's powered by One Click. So we're getting all that wonderful, rich data that they've graciously gathered and sorted out for us. And we focus really on the essential A1 through A3 modules, which is in the early stages. So those are as products, they're mandatory for products in this level of assessment, right? But we're looking at the extraction, the transport, and the manufacturing of that product. Because as designers, that's really what we have control over. The specification, that's what we're putting out, and whoever's procuring the elements, depending on the contracts, they're the ones responsible for purchasing those elements within that spec, right? So our LCA is only as tight as our spec. So our goal is really to make it easier for designers to meet these standards, understand their specifications with Naviate Zero so they can deliver and get better products and start specifying those into their projects. And there was an animation on here that I should have played, but we'll just kind of catch up and watch it now. So Naviate Zero really focused on the A1 through A3, where One Click and focuses on that entire life cycle. But these two work together to make a little more synergy and connect the data so you're not remapping and having to rework all this stuff. So moving on, we're just going to introduce Naviate Zero pretty quick. Some of the key roles that we see for Naviate Zero really is going to empower these professionals with the early phase in the analysis tools. So AEC experts really can use it for initial assessments. For a comprehensive life cycle assessment and reporting, a separate One Click LCA license is going to be needed, right? So you're going to need to refine that data down and whittle it, right? So you start off generic and then you refine it as you go. One Click LCA will ensure that in-depth analysis is helping you guys meet your LCA goals. And really the distinction optimizes resources allocation within Naviate Zero, benefiting all the AEC professionals. And One Click LCA is really specialized solution for the core users engaged in the full LCA assessment, right? So what does that mean? Basically, we're trying to simplify the complex topic so designers can use it within Revit, right? You're still going to have an accredited professional or a sustainability professional or even the contractor who's running these more complex models, but you want to use it for a simpler process of understanding brick versus wood, concrete versus steel, right? Or what happens if I replace tile to tile? And are the impacts of those tile even worth the cost? Those are the kind of things we're starting to look at earlier on and trying to get you guys engaged in. So when you get to One Click, you have a better idea of where you're going and that mapping process is much simpler. So why are we going to try to push it in Naviate Zero? Well, Naviate Zero is going to be a game changer for sustainability. I believe in the architecture and construction realm. We're going to really try to help map these pieces together, right? Sustainable material selection has been made easy. Naviate Zero is going to simplify this process. It's going to hopefully help you make more educated decisions within Revit workflow, and you're going to be able to access the most latest tailored environmental product declarations or EPD and sort those out, search them, mark your favorites effortlessly within the Revit environment with trusted One Click LCA data, right? We're also going to build carbon optimization. Naviate Zero directly optimize building carbon within your Revit model. So you can access a vast CO2 value repository, and it's going to empower you to conduct that early LCA in real time without having to be super accurate and have every nut and bolt done, right? You'll be able to modify this data within Revit and your families and on the material level as well to see the impact of how your GWP is going to impact your model, right? Also, one of the big things, it's going to integrate seamlessly within Revit, right? So Naviate Zero is going to align with your BIM principles, and it's going to support an early stage life cycle assessment, A1 through A3, and we're going to help you calculate embodied carbon, which is your estimate of CO2, and hopefully streamline your design process. So I know you guys have all seen that the iteration where it takes 2 weeks to get out, they analyze it, 2 weeks gets back. By the time you get the data back, the design is moved in or certain things are locked in and you don't have room to change. So we're trying to change that and make where you guys have more power early on and make those decisions. And so the earlier you can start discussing this and talking about it, the more likely it is to be adopted or even affordable within the project. All right. I'm sure you guys want to hear enough of me talking and rambling on about Naviate Zero. So let me just open it up and show you how simple it is. I'm going to go ahead and just fire up the Revit 2024 model. Pretty complex model here. Now, when I'm talking early stages, this may be a little more than what we're looking at here. But what you want to do is be able to isolate your views and understand what's in the model and then use your filtering, right? But I'll just kind of show you how you can set all this up, and we can apply this kind of to an early stage thought process as well. Even if we just strip this down to walls, roofs, floors, and our basic, shell of the building in the early stages, the workflow is still exactly the same. So although this is more detailed, it is still very, very usable in the early stages because you can apply these things rapidly. And the less materials you have to map, the less confusing it is. So the more detailed it is, you're going to have a lot more going on. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. So I'm just making sure you guys can see my screen. When you get into the Revit environment, once you have Naviate Zero, you'll see you have a Naviate Zero tab up here in the top right or top hand of your screen. And then you're going to go down to the Naviate Zero panel, and you'll see a number of tools here. We have a help bar over on your right-hand side. When you click on this, it automatically takes you to our Naviate help panel, where you can get what's new, just learn some about the help, Symetri learning tools and modules. These are fantastic if you were just wanting to see how the best practice or workflow is to get to there. You can help configure Naviate here, check for new updates. You can even submit ideas. This is fantastic. If you have an idea how our tool can be better, go here to the ideation portal and tell us what you need. That's the best way to get our tool to be featured and focused around you guys, our clients, because that's what we want. We want it to be tailored for you guys. Also, when you get out, you can click exit and it'll take you right back to the Naviate Zero screen. The first thing you want to do, because you can't do anything else with Naviate Zero until you click the settings button. When you click the settings button, it's going to open up a really simple user interface for settings. Right now, it automatically wants to limit me to the United States of America, which is fine if I'm in the US. But say I'm in Europe, I can go ahead and limit that, take that filter out, and it'll go ahead and open up the databases for me. Early on, we may not be as concerned whether it's Tracy or CML because the calculations are in fact exactly the same. They're just reported differently across the pond. So we start off maybe with a wider range because we may be procuring materials from across the pond. We may be procuring materials from the US. We don't know yet. It's still very early on. And as we refine our model, we whittle down our information and make sure that all of our data is within that proper database if we are reporting to something like BREEAM or LEED, correct? All right. If not, you're doing this for your own personal exercise, just for learning. Okay. With this, say I don't want to go through all the different, all the categories. I can uncheck all the categories that I don't want. And let's just do an architectural run real quick. And I'm just going to go ahead and just turn on my walls just for simplicity. So we don't have 9 million categories pop up and all the complexities, right? And I'm just going to keep my walls in the new construction. And I'm not going to worry about everything in the existing at the moment because I would want to run those separately, right? I'd want to understand existing versus new and where that line is drawn. So I'm going to go ahead and just do walls in new construction for now, try to simplify it. And it says, please select an area where the building is going to be situated. So it wants me to put it within a region. You can see it gives you every state in the United States, and it also will give you countries down here at the bottom. So you can pick the United Kingdom or USA. I'm going to assume most of you guys are probably across the pond and not over here early on in the United States. So I'll go United Kingdom for the example today. All right. We'll warn you guys, I am not as savvy with the metric system as I should be. All right. So nothing happened, but it looks everything is good because my settings are set. I didn't get any warnings. We are good to go. Next thing I want to do is I want to go to apply resources. And this is where the magic happens. This is really the meat of the tool, right? This is where you're going to be doing your mapping, and it often takes the most amount of time. People are too concerned here about being 100% accurate and right, and that is not always the case. We're trying to get a general understanding early on, so you want to find something that aligns with your spec, but that is, you don't have to go through it at that level of detail. But we provide all that information in here for you. So this interface is probably very similar to what you're used to for any LCA process, right? It looks very similar. You see your wall category here, and you have a category tag that tells you that confirming you're in the walls. And then you have a family. It tells you the parapet, caps, and bands, and then it tells you the type. And then it tells you 100% of that area. So you got all those walls. And so what we'll do is you can expand on these walls and you can see the makeup of those walls. And so within this assembly, these are the different layers in that type. Does that make sense? And so it's going to break it up and group it in that matter. And so these are just basic concrete walls. And look, there's only one layer of basic concrete. So let's just go ahead and knock this out real quick. What I would do is I would go ahead and I would look up my spec. Let's see what kind of concrete you're using. What's your density? When's the cure time? Is there any kind of additive materials in there? Fly ash? Is there replacement concrete? Is there recycled aggregate? These are things you kind of need to understand from your spec before you start picking this. Now, you're going to see that we probably have 100,000 concrete EPDs to choose from. Let's just look. And you can see there's a whole bunch of concrete to go through. So that doesn't really help us. So now the next thing we need to do is kind of understand the type of concrete. So this is a wall core. It looks like it's a shaft wall. So it can't be lightweight concrete. It's not gonna be a block, right? So we have to understand exactly what we're looking for. So you'd go through and you would find your concrete type, and you would go. All you have to do is click and map, right? So let's just make sure we find the right one. Concrete walling unit from Semi-Dry Mix. All right, we'll just say this is it, right? All you have to do is click your resource here and then double click apply. And it's gonna, says wrong resource. All right. Why is that? All right. I'm not sure why it's failing there, but okay. Let's see if we can find a different concrete that matches that. Some high density concrete blocks. Baseline concrete. Let's just try generic concrete. This should work, right? No. All right. What is it? What's the warning we're getting here? Why can't we apply this? Failed wrong unit. So this concrete is probably going to be in cubic yards or cubic feet, I'm assuming, and this is asking for an area. So you'll need to go ahead and update that. So let's check a look here. Doesn't give any information. Oh, meters cubed. All right. So let's go ahead and change this unit to volume. Concrete is typically done in volume, and I bet you it applies now. And voila. So say we were wanting to compare these two different kinds of concretes. Maybe see these two C40s. They're 50, 50, and then you have 38 GGBS and 0 GBS. So what's the difference between those? Well, within Naviate Zero, you can go ahead and click, and compare these. And you get the compare resources tab where it puts them side by side, and you can start seeing the CO2 impact, the resource name, also get the categories and check out all the information and data that's provided to it. Now you can see here the technical specification is slightly different. The GGBS is the only difference in this concrete. So we would need to understand what that means within the specification and if it's worth the impact, right? So you can see the global warming potential here is 248,000 kilograms, and this one is 357,000 kilograms of CO2 per meter squared. So the impact on them are quite different. So we need to figure out what the difference is with the 38 GGBS and the 0 GGBS, and if that's a proper substitute. So that's something you need to go into the specs and also check out the actual EPD for these materials and then compare those, right? All right. You can also control the properties that are visible in here. So if there's some that aren't useful to you, you go ahead and just swipe those out, like CO2, biogenic carbon. Maybe you don't want this nonlinear, like, so you can start modifying this compare resources and make sure that data is appropriate for you as well. All right. So after I went ahead and mapped that, you'll start to see, I can go ahead and map a couple more just to make sure we have some resources in there. Let me go ahead and change these all to volume. All right. Click apply. I'll have to check the material. Click apply. All right. There we go. And so now that you got those materials mapped in there, it'll automatically show that. And it can show you which materials you have selected, and you can just filter it through that as well. All righty. And you can also set up some other filters based on group by category or the wall types, family types, and what's shown and not shown, right? So that's the way we can start whittling out this information, start mapping all this. We also have some automatic mapping feature where it'll try to take its best guess at what you have. But just know sometimes you may need to uncheck it to get a full scope. Maybe the way the details written and the resource description is not picking up something you're looking for, right? You can also filter by data source, again, adding other areas and regions to there. You can do by resource category. You can filter by type, whether it's a generic EPD, a manufacturer-specific EPD, or a private EPD. And you can filter by CO2 type, whether it's a low impacting or very high impacting material, and then also by the units it's available in. So if I'm looking for concrete, I know it's in volume, I'll just go ahead and filter by volume so I get all the EPDs written in volume or area. All right. And so once that's done, I go ahead and close because everything is automatically saved. I'll go back to Naviate Zero, and then I can see my CO2 calculations. Now, it's not going to be too full because we didn't map 10,000 materials. But what we're going to see is just real quickly a slight output that we're getting real quick, just so we can start seeing those impacts, right? So if we were doing very early on concrete versus steel, you'd be able to open this up and this graph would be able to show you what's the impact of each of those as soon as it loads up. There we go. And so obviously with one type of material in here, our impact is all going to be concrete. So if we did some other categories, we can add different categories in there and show what's the impact of all those. So if I went and added some steel, you would see some steel and it would show you the impact between those. In fact, we can go ahead and do that real quick just to show you. All right, so we're going to turn off that selected only. And let's go to, let's do this parapet cap. Let's just say this is aluminum. I know. Sorry about that. Check there and click apply. It's not going to go by area. It's probably going to go by length. So sometimes it's you got to just take a guessing game with what type of unit it is and how much you got. All right. Well, apparently I can't use that one at all. So let's look for a different one. Nope. Come on. There we go. All right. So one item applied, it tells you there. I can go ahead and close. And then let's go back to our chart. As soon as it opens. All right. And it should be updating with the different categories. There we go. And now you can see it'll break you down with the two different types of materials we have and the percentage of their impact. So we can start deciding maybe on a general level which direction we want to go. You can also export those and that will come out into a nice packaged report as well. And then we can also use this information, this material information within the one-click environment as well when this is done. And apologies for all the waiting. Let that crank out. There we go. And it'll create you a nice export that wants to take you right into One Click LCA. So with that, I think this is a good time to segue over for Samuel, and I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over.
Hi, everyone. Samuel here. I will now be running through One Click LCA, so how that really works well with Naviate Zero, but also delving into a bit more specifically how One Click LCA itself works. Right, so to start off with, the key roles that the One Click LCA software supports, or lifecycle assessment as a whole, is you have architects, engineers, builders, manufacturers, investors, and institutes. So it really does apply across the board for the construction industry, anywhere in the world, really. And so for architects, they design for net zero carbon strategies for the developers. They can compare the different material options, determine what the best routes for the different design options can be. This is actually, I'd like to emphasize the importance of doing this earlier on. And so this is really where a lot of the these kind of different life cycle assessment or embodied carbon calculation tools have the greatest effect at the earlier stages, because this is really where you can start. You have the greatest ability to reduce the impact of a building, because if you know exactly where the impacts are potentially going to come from, you can address them without going further down the design process and then struggling to implement those changes later on. So it's the same for engineers, material identification, understanding what those impacts are, builders, product specification, maybe at the construction stage of a project, any changes there. Investors, it's quite often about the greenhouse gas portfolio of their projects, trying to hit scope 3 emissions, which is generally considered a kind of high-hanging fruit. But with these sorts of tools that have been introduced, it really brings it down to a low-hanging fruit. It's much more accessible, much easier to understand what these scope 3 emissions are. And then, of course, institutes carbon tracking and benchmarking, but also further researching the topic of life cycle assessment. And so why One Click LCA? Here I'm going to highlight 3 main reasons for using One Click. So the first one is it transforms what used to be a mundane, kind of lengthy process of doing a life cycle assessment. It used to be very difficult, and it's made it much more accessible. And so it's something that not only specialists with PhDs as it previously would be done, but actually it enables anyone to be able to do this. So everyone by using these different softwares as a service platforms, it offers an extensive knowledge base to guide users through the lifecycle assessment process. So it really simplifies any kind of framework, policy, or green building certification that you might be doing the LCA for, and it kind of keeps you in line with the way in which it's supposed to be done for that. So the second is it provides a globally connected platform, which is the largest EPD database in the world. It's currently at around 200,000 data points, but this is continually growing. And it's got plugins for various different tools, modeling softwares and things like that. But also, as I mentioned, it supports for global compliance standards. So pretty much any kind of LCA that you could be doing, it's going to be providing you the methodology for that. So One Click bridges the information gaps that save time and additional effort required during the traditional LCA process. And then lastly, its integration with BIM and BEM bridges the hassle of data manipulation and interoperability issues, offering another layer of efficiency to the whole process. So let's dive in a bit deeper to see its supporting project types and phases and some of the differentiations. So One Click LCA is the world's leading construction and manufacturing LCA software. It's used by 9 of the top 10 architects across the world, 8 out of 10 of the contractors and largest contractors and manufacturers. And it provides users with the ability to produce LCAs in accordance with 80 different green building certifications and regulations around the world. And as I already mentioned, it has the largest material database in the world, currently at around 250,000 data points. And so what this means is the data sets within it are what the impacts of all the different materials are in the world. And so it's common that One Click LCA is requested as the industry standard tool. One of the main reasons is because of the size of the database, it ensures that there's consistency across LCAs that are done on various different projects for all of the stakeholders involved with the process. And so the software provides three primary solutions. So the one that we'll be going through today, and really our sort of flagship tool that got One Click LCA going, is building LCAs. But this allows you to do LCAs across all different project types. It's got specialization for MEP, interior design, retrofits, etc. Similar one to that is for infrastructure LCAs. And then lastly, product LCAs, which is a software that enables manufacturers to produce EPDs of their products. And so this is actually one of the fastest growing aspects of One Click, because the uptake of EPDs within the construction industries around the world, particularly the UK, is really going through quite an explosion right now, which is good because it's mainly down to architects, engineers, developers putting pressure on manufacturers to produce this information, because of course this is vital content for doing an LCA if you want it to be as accurate as possible. And so, as I mentioned, it allows for global compliance. One Click took what was previously difficult and time consuming. It's automated pretty much all of the processes. So it's really simplified doing LCA so that anyone can do it. But also it can be done at any stage of a building project. So, previously it was done at the end once you had all the information, because it could take quite a long time. And also you needed to know what was going into it. But there's a balance between assumptions and the actual data that goes in. So One Click sort of uses both of these things exactly as they should be to allow you to do it even before you've technically drawn anything and know anything about a building. And this is important as an LCA, or the most effective way that one can understand the true impacts of a building or infrastructure project or product or service. It's a numerical and scientific methodology, and therefore removes any ability for greenwashing. So it is really the most truthful way in which you can actually declare the impacts. So you can also have these things, your LCA is third-party verified to give it a little bit extra rigor. And then it's really a decision-making tool, as it was stated in the various ISO and EN standards that outline how it should be done. And so it's not necessarily going to tell you what to do, but it'll show you where the problems are, and then you can use your intuition to make changes and adjust your designs to iteratively reduce the embodied carbon of them. So while there is a use for the One Click LCA to make doing LCAs easier and faster, there's certain formats the LCAs need to be done in, whether it's for things like BREEAM or LEED, but also regulations. So there's certainly a lot of regulations that are just about to come in. This will become far more commonplace, and the One Click LCA software keeps up to date with whatever changes that there might be made within the industry. So I'll now move on. And regarding One Click LCA's applicable project phase, it can support whole life carbon assessments from conceptual design through to operation and maintenance. And so it does this with tools like Carbon Designer 3D, which is an early stage tool. You input information as little as, you can give the project a name, a reference or a location that the project's in, the number of floors, things like that, any heated flooring, but also frame types. And then you can adjust quantities to kind of bring a massing model as close as possible to what your design will be. And then you simply choose between different material build-ups, and it's going to give you an instant feedback as to what sort of impact those design decisions have. At the concept stage, you can import information from parametric modeling, but also energy models, things like IES, Design Builder, and so on. And then, of course, BIM integrations with Revit. So you can export all the data coming from there. So it makes life a lot easier when you're trying to combine the data within to your LCAs. You can specify and compare at the build section. So if you're looking for different materials that would be a very sustainable choice, it's very easy to look through the database and see what options there are out there. Then as built, so this is kind of the most ideal time to do an LCA because you have all the information possible. So of course, that's going to be very simple then. Refurbishment, so there's building circularity as well, because this really goes hand in hand with LCA because you're essentially taking how recyclable or how recycled and reused the materials that go into your project are, but also what happens with them at their end of life phases. So it works perfectly with LCA. So really, you can actually do these two forms of analysis concurrently without having to do very much extra work to generate results for them. And then lastly, we've got the reporting. So all the ways that you might need to report the information about your LCAs, the software is going to be able to do that for you. So at this point, I will now go into the software and show you what I mean by some of the slides that I've spoken about. And so I'll stop sharing that screen and come onto my webpage. Okay. Let's just check that's sharing. Perfect. Okay, so to start off with, I'm very quickly going to flash this page up. I'm not going to go through it now, but this is when you hit the import from Naviate Zero tool, it's actually going to bring you to this page here. And so this is the typical import process if you're using any form of integration. So whether it's coming directly from Revit or coming from Naviate Zero, or even if you're importing an Excel spreadsheet like a bill of quantities, a cost plan, things like that. This is the process that you go through to essentially map the data from the one-click database to the data that you're importing. And so we do have a webinar that I think Nicole will share a link to where we go through this process in more depth. But one of the key strengths between Naviate Zero and One Click LCA is that Naviate Zero uses all of the data within the One Click LCA database. So it's unique in that sense. And it means that anything that you map within within your Revit model using Naviate Zero is going to exactly identically map any data that's in the One Click software. So the import process is completely seamless, and you just simply go through these stages and add it to your project, and then you're going to have all of the results come up within the One Click software and be able to go into more depths with the kind of an analysis that you can do. So I'll start off by coming into this page here. So it's a web-based software, so there's nothing really to download unless there's any kind of native integrations that you might have. So there may be downloadables there. And this is what we call the project homepage. So I've got the name of my project up here. We've got some general information that we input essentially at the start. So when it was created, who created it, but also the building type and floor area. So it doesn't actually make a difference what type of LCA you're doing or what kind of building you're working on. The software looks and works in exactly the same way. So currently I'm doing an office building for this one. We've then got results and benchmarking. So this is just an overview of some of the results. So you have embodied carbon by life cycle stage breakdown, embodied carbon by structure. And then on the left-hand side, we've got the One Click LCA benchmarking tool. So there's a couple of benchmarks out there. This is one that was created by One Click LCA, where we've taken a bunch of projects that have been done within the software, made comparisons between all of them, and then kind of rank them against each other, so you can see where yours sits in comparison with all of these other projects. And so there's hundreds of different use cases. So you can see apartment buildings in Canada if you want. So there's benchmarks for all over the world for all different types of building, which is good. And so the section below that is really the most important part of the project homepage. This is where we can see our actual designs. And so the way the software works is you create a project, and then within those projects, you can create designs. And so there's an unlimited number of projects that you can create, and also designs within the project. So there's kind of no end to how many LCAs you can actually perform. And so what you're looking at is a table where on the left-hand side, we've got a number of different what are called calculation tools. So these are either green building certifications, like we've got BREEAM UK. They could be also regulations or frameworks. And so in the United Kingdom, if you're doing an LCA, you're generally going to be following the RICS whole life carbon assessment guidance. This is version 1, which is also compliant with the GLA requirements. And so the GLA so the Greater London Authority does actually have it's not necessarily a regulation, but more of a planning application requirement, where if you're building as of a certain number of stories or certain footprint, you have to perform, I think it's about 2 LCAs. And so in any case, this tool will comply with the requirements of that. As of July this year, version 2 did actually come out. And so this would probably be the most likely tool that you would use. But also there's things like building circularity, and I've got life cycle costing here as well. And so this is just a small handful of the 80 different tools that One Click has. The majority of them, the majority of the 80 tools won't be relevant to everyone, because it could be, standards for Germany or France or the US, in which case you're not going to be using that in the UK. But it's not all just about LCA. As you can see, we've got life cycle costing and also building circularity. So these things really just go hand in hand with LCA, which is why they can also be incorporated into projects. So the next column is the unit. And then the 3 columns I have after that are 3 different designs that I've created. So I've got my option 1 baseline here, which is a concrete frame. We also have a steel frame, and then we've also got a timber frame here as well. And so if I wanted to add something to, say, my option 1, my concrete frame, I'll come into my RICS version 1 tool. And if I click the drop-down menu, it gives me, the drop-down menu here gives us few results, and then the various different data inputs. So you've got building materials, energy consumption, and so on. So there's a broad scope of all the different things I can input about the building's whole lifespan. And in fact, if I look at different ones, so say BREEAM, for example, you can see that the inputs are slightly different. And in fact, with building circularity, it's a bit clearer because you can see there's even fewer. So the point is that the software is designed to keep you confined to whatever you're supposed to be doing. And also if there's things that you're meant to do, it's going to tell you. And if there's anything you're not supposed to do, you simply can't do it. One last thing I'd like to point out about these is that I mentioned they do also work concurrently. So if I am doing a RICS version 1 lifecycle assessment, then if I input anything for the building materials within my same design, all of the other building materials are also going to update. So I could be doing a BREEAM LCA at exactly the same time. I could be doing a lifecycle costing, building circularity, and I'm not having to do really very much extra work at all to be conducting these different kinds of analysis, because it's going to be populating all of the information for you. So what I'll now do is I'll come on to the next screen, which is so as if I'm inputting some building materials, and I'll show you what the database looks like and what it really looks like to input data into a design. So you can see that I'm currently on my option 1 design, and I'm actually, just to clarify, I'm on the RICS version 1, the GLA tool. So all of the data inputs that were in the dropdown, you can see appear across the top here as various as the tabs. So it's just a process of working through these, inputting the data, and that's what's going to generate the results for you. We're currently on building materials, and then below that I've got a filter, which I'll come back to, and then I've got all the different building elements. So foundations, I've got vertical structures, so that's things like external walls, columns, and all the information up to building technology. So the software is designed to allow you to do a full building LCA over its entire lifespan, but it can really be used at any scope that you want to. So if you just wanted to look at the impacts of maybe a wall build-up, in this case, you just simply input the information about the wall and the materials that's going into it, and it's going to generate all the results for you. So it's it can do any form of LCA, even retrofits and things like that, because we quite often get asked questions about this. And so if I wanted to add something to the external walls, I can come to the drop-down menu here. And if I click that, it's going to give me a list of all the different material categories that are within the database. There we go. So you can see them all here. But I can also refine the search by typing in material names, manufacturer names, or EPD numbers. And so you can see it's only showing anything relevant to that. But we can also use the filter at the top. So I'm going to select one of these. There we go. So let's say bricks. We've got 546 different brick options to choose from. We can specify by country of origin, and then also we can specify by the different data sources. So as I mentioned, largest material database in the world, but also importantly, it has access to every single EPD database that there is. So pretty much if the information's out there, it's most likely going to be within the database. So you don't really need to worry that much about any missing data because it's constantly being updated. And so with bricks selected, if I click the drop down now, you'll see that it's going to show me all the different materials relevant to brick. And so there's a couple of things to note is that because the project's based in the UK, we get all the local data for the UK first, and then there's generic data. So the difference is that generic's more of an average assumption-based value, and then the manufacturer-specific data is of a particular product by a particular manufacturer. So if I click on one of these green question marks, it brings up the data card, so you can see all the information about it. You've got a description, but most importantly, you've got the environmental profile. So here you can see the global warming potential. You've got the performance ranking, where we've taken all other similar products, ranked them against each other, so you can see where it sits amongst them. So if you are trying to specify better products, this is a really fantastic way of doing that and being able to see exactly how it performs. You can also download the EPDs directly as well. So if you want to gather these up for any specification needs, then you have all the information very easily accessible. And then, so that's pretty much it. Just a quick thing to go through is that, of course, you can input individual materials. You don't necessarily want to do that at the start. So we do also have thousands of constructions, which are made up of multiple materials. That saves you a lot of time. But at this point, I realize we're coming close to the end. So I'm going to go into the results section now. And so, yeah, this is the results for my option 1 baseline. We're looking at the RIX version 1 tool. So this is what the interface looks like. You've got a table with the overview of results here. So we've got the life cycle stages across the top, the building elements according to their RIX classification. And so, of course, the number is the corresponding kilograms of embodied carbon. If I scroll a bit further down, there's a completeness checker that's just double checking that you haven't input an extra 0 or you're not missing anything. And so you can just validate these things so the software knows it's all correct. This one's very useful. The most contributing materials, you can see what the most contributing materials are. And so say, for example, this reinforced steel is producing 136 tons of embodied carbon, and that's 6.4% of the project. So we can show sustainable alternatives. So it gives us a list of materials that are either the same or similar properties that would be a more sustainable choice to go with. So it's very easy to optimize the sustainability of your design. The section below that is then the graphs. So you can really drill down into the results and where the main impact areas are coming from. So this one's showing embodied carbon by life cycle stage. You've got it by classification. So for example, internal finishes are very high in this design. So maybe you want to duplicate this design and then play around with the internal finishes, try out different materials, and then you're going to have that comparison between what those impacts might be. So lots of different ways to see the data. You've got bubble chart, Sankey diagram, and so on. So that's pretty much it for that. I think just quickly, I'll show you there's actually one also very useful set of results, which is on the project homepage here. We've got a set of graphs, which is essentially comparing my 3 designs to each other. So this one's showing the total embodied carbon comparison, but also you have things like this, which is the embodied carbon by building element. So you can again see where the main impact's coming from, and everything can always be downloaded as various different image files or Excel. The raw Excel data can also be downloaded. So to round off, Naviate Zero empowers everyday designers with tools for informed decision-making and efficient lifecycle analysis, while One Click LCA supports the in-depth lifecycle assessment process and robust reporting, providing specialized solutions for the core users. The last thing to mention is that there's the Symetri's decarbonisation solutions. So if you want to scan this QR code, that will take you to more information about that if you want to find out more. And then the next slide after that is to introduce the decarbonisation through integrated digital delivery. And so this will be hosted by Luke again, and also Shivani.
Shivani and I will kind of give into some of our case studies from the people we talked to week one, and we'll learn about how these are actually utilized in a project, and we're not just gaslighting you guys about this, right? So we'll show you some practical examples.
Brilliant. Thank you. And see you at the next one.